Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 1 through 12. But all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. Whether it is love or hate, man does not know, both are before him. It is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner, and he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. Also, the hearts of the children of man are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. But he who is joined with all the living has hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun. Go, eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white, let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going. Again, I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge. But time and chance happen to them all. For man does not know his time, like fish that are taken in an evil net, and like birds that are caught in a snare, so the children of man are snared at an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them.
All right, another round in Ecclesiastes. You guys okay? I feel like every week I have to check in. Everybody doing okay? Read these passages. Just want to make sure nobody's jumping onto Prozac too soon or anything. I will say, so there's this curious thing. On the personal level, I find myself more strangely, maybe uniquely is the word, more uniquely encouraged and challenged by Ecclesiastes than I thought I was going to be coming into the book. Dare I even say I am more uniquely challenged and encouraged by Ecclesiastes than I have been by some of the other passages and books that we've been preaching for a little while. In fact, some of you maybe, we've met up just to share life, share wisdom, share a bit of discipleship or counseling or whatever it is. Some of you might be getting sick of me saying, well, I wonder what Kohelet would have to say about that. Because it's just, I don't know. God is using this to really poke at things and challenge me and also encourage me in some really neat ways. Okay, but what I'm finding is the encouragement and the challenge and it comes on the back end of sort of like downing this tough pill, which is hard to swallow, right? Ecclesiastes feels like that. It feels like medicine that tastes terrible, right? When you put it in your mouth and it burns on the way down, but as it works its way into the gut and out into your life, right? It does its job if you let it. And it can cultivate a life that is more free, that enjoys and delights in simple pleasures and things than maybe going into it. So on the personal end, I'm enjoying it. On the pastoral end, or on the preaching end of it, I find it to be somewhat of a challenge, not just because you're dealing with wisdom literature, which is its own challenge in its own right, but also because, I don't know what preacher doesn't want to be encouraging and uplifting to you and, get you amped up and juiced up to go back out into the world and play the role that God has for you for the sake of his kingdom, right? All that. And I think Ecclesiastes can do that, but to do that, it's like I have to be the parent that makes you take your medicine, right? That swallows that difficult pill. Our littlest, Jeffrey, quite literally, our littlest. They told him at a young age, yeah, you're little, and you're not going to be able to drive someday unless we start juicing you a little bit. And so he gets growth hormones every night. And so most often I'm the guy that has to stick his hindquarters with a nice little shot, right? Which he's never too thrilled about. But I'm telling him, but man, this will pay off one day, and you'll be able to live life that's more free and enjoying and satisfying because you'll be able to reach the cookies on I don't know, whatever. And I feel like that. I feel like in the role as a preacher, like my job is to make sure you take the medicine and you let that discomfort go down and work its way in through the system. I often find, just as people in the church or Christians, sometimes when they read Ecclesiastes, we find ways to sidestep some of the uncomfortable stuff that we don't like to hear. Okay, surely he's writing this on a bad day, and he's just a little bit depressed, and sure you don't mean it, you're exaggerating things a little bit. Or sometimes what I find Christians a lot of times will do is they like to add this neat little 3-word phrase at the end of any difficult sentences in the book. Right? They come across a difficult sentence and they want to add this phrase, apart from God. All of life is hevel, right? That's that word that we keep talking about, this smoke, this hevel. Well, that doesn't sound good, so let me just put on apart from God. Or what gain does a man have from all of his toil? What profit at the end of the day does somebody gain from all his toil? Well, that's not too comfortable, so maybe we'll just put apart from God next to it. Or I went and searched, and I lived my life trying to enjoy this and that and to grow into wisdom and to seek after justice, and I found it all at the end of the day was just hevel. Well, surely you mean apart from God. Right? It's almost like we as a way of not taking the medicine, we want to say that this writer, okay, clearly this is the perspective of a man who has long since forsaken God and is running off on life in his own direction apart from God. And it's my job to say, no, you got to swallow that. That's not what this is. You go to the end of the book, and when the narrator comes in and summarizes it all, he says, yeah, Kohelet, the preacher, the writer, he gave us stuff that is wise, that is just, that is good, and it's like a what? You remember the word? It's like a goad, right? The sharp stuff at the end of the shepherd's stick, right? When he needs to move the sheep, right? That's what they describe these words of wisdom. They prick and they prod and they hurt and they're not comfortable, but if you let them do their job, they'll lead you to where you need to go. And all of that, I don't know if there's any more of that tension than here in chapter 9. Right? On the one hand, right, there's the tough stuff that he says. And he says stuff in chapter 9 I didn't know you could say and keep breathing at the end of it. But he does. And he keeps going. There's stuff that's difficult and uncomfortable, but then there's a sweet part in the middle that he wants to free you up to see and to enjoy. Right? And so that's what we're going after this morning. We got to take the tough medicine, hopefully, but let it do its job, and we see the goodness that he is after in our lives. And I'll let you know where it's going. I'll let you know the main point of it. I think that what he would have us to hear this morning, I'll let it know right at the beginning, is that in light of the reality of death and in light of the unpredictability of life, be careful about the constant striving for control and instead live the life that God gives you to the full. Right? In light of the reality of death, in light of the unpredictability of life, be careful about this constant lust for control that, in other words, would rob you of living the life that God has for you to the full. Okay? So if we can sink that in, I've done my job. Let's see if we can do it. All right, so he starts off here in the beginning of chapter 9. He says, all this I laid to heart, which immediately lets you know there's stuff in the end of chapter 8 that we have to remember. What is all this that he's talking about? Well, if you were to back it up and look at the end of chapter 8, he's looking out and he's saying, man, there is this thing that is driving me nuts, and I'm seeing this vanity. All right, and don't forget that word vanity, what it means. It's hevel, which again it means smoke, right? There's this thing that it's like smoke. I can't grab it. I can't make sense of it. It defies being controlled, right? So there's this hevel that I see everywhere, and that is that to the righteous, it happens as if they were the wicked. Or to the wicked happens what should happen to the righteous. Right? Those who are faithful, those who are living obediently, those who are living lives in pursuit of God seem to get what the wicked deserve. And those who are wicked, who are living life on their own terms, however they darn well please, seem to be getting what the righteous deserve. And I don't understand that. It makes no sense to me. This is smoke, he says, right? And then he goes on to say, and when I applied my heart to know wisdom, this is the end of chapter 8, and to see this business that is done on earth, and I had neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep. Then I saw the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he doesn't know. I see this smoke. I see this hevel, this vanity out there. And for the life of me, I can't figure out what God is doing. And you're the wisest person in the world. If he tells you he thinks he knows what God is doing, he doesn't. So all this, beginning in verse 9, or chapter 9, I laid to heart, examining it. And then he goes on, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. Right? At the end of the day, he says this. And look, he's speaking to the righteous and to the wise. And he's saying, your lives and your deeds, they're in the hand of God. Which for us, whenever we talk about our lives being in God's hands, like that's a word, that's a phrase that gives us warm fuzzies and comfortable things. I don't know if it gives Kohelet warm and fuzzies, because look what he says. Whether it is love or hate that you receive from the hand of God, man does not know. Both are before him. Ouch. And he says it's the same for all. Since the same thing happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and to the evil, to the clean, to the unclean, to him who sacrifices and to him who doesn't sacrifice, to the good one, so it is as to the sinner. And he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. And then here it is in verse 3. He cries out with this, I don't know, a bold statement. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun. And here's where I figure the narrator would come in at the end of that verse and say, and he died. Or, you come in and, that's the phrase, right? Like, you hear what he's saying. Your lives are in the hand of God. But whether you're going to receive love or hate from that, nobody knows, because the same thing happens to the good, to the bad, to the righteous, to the unrighteous, to the sinner as well as to the righteous. And this is an evil that I see. Right? He's pushing it. This is as bold as he gets in the book. Right? Again, I would be expecting the alarms that go off on the golf course when lightning is striking, to be flaring, to be going off as he's saying this. Because the same event happens to all, he says. And what's that same event? It's this reality of death. Doesn't matter how good you are, doesn't matter how righteous you are, doesn't matter how many you sacrifice, death comes for us all. Verse 4, he who is joined with the living has hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no reward. For the memory of them is forgotten. Their love, their hate, their envy, they have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the land. Oh, everything in you wants to okay, Kohelet, hold on a second. Just wait, there's more to come in this story, right? We're only halfway through the Bible. You haven't even got to the part where death gets defeated in the resurrection. Okay, but just hold on a second. Again, my job, sit in that for a minute. Hear what he's saying. Let it go down. Let it burn. I think one of the things that he's poking at, because it's a theme throughout his book, one of the things he wants to get, God is not one that you can control. And God is not one that you can manipulate with your acts of righteousness, with your devotion and your worship and your contrition and your sacrifice. It's not like you do those things and all of a sudden God's will is manipulated to come to your aid. Or better yet, one thing we learn about God from the book of Ecclesiastes is that God has no interest in being a pagan idol. And what do we mean by that? In the ancient world, if you wanted your fields to bear more fruit so that you would have more food over the winter, well, what did you do? You went to some shrine or some temple of the goddess of fertility, and you would burn incense, or you would say your prayers, do your acts of devotion. Maybe you would even come and sacrifice something that was very precious to you, right? And the expectation was, okay, payment rendered, give me the service now of blessing my field and my crops. And what you get from Ecclesiastes, God has no interest in being a pagan idol, that you can come and do your little acts of devotion and worship and prayer and sacrifice, expecting, okay, payment has been rendered, I expect now service in my favor. God's not interested in that. You don't control me, you don't manipulate me. Your acts of devotion and worship and prayer, they are not to bend His will to ours, right? We worship, we sacrifice, we serve, even we pray, ultimately so that our will would be bent to His, and He would use us however He would use us in this broken world that He sends us to. Okay? That's maybe a tough pill to swallow, but something we need to hear. Or maybe another way of putting that, if you ever hear from me or from up here, what sounds like health and wealth, prosperity, gospel, any of that sort of stuff, right? You give your life to Jesus, you serve and you follow Him, you'll be obedient to Him, and you get the American dream, right? Your cancer goes away, you get promoted at a job, and your wife stops nagging you about it because you forgot to take the trash out at the end of it. Not that my wife would ever do that. If you ever hear that from up here, just know that the dementia has probably set in, and just go gentle on me, easy. Just show me the door very quietly at that point. Put me down easy, not old Yeller style or whatever. To do that, not only to preach that, to declare that, is not only defies the scriptures and Ecclesiastes, it's to make a mockery of the millions upon millions of Christians who throughout history and all around the world live their lives in more faithful sacrifice, devotion, and sacrificial service to Christ than I've ever known, and yet they suffer and are persecuted for it. Or to preach that way would even to be make a mockery of Christ, who was perfectly obedient and perfectly faithful and perfectly righteous, yet more than perhaps anyone else knew poverty, injustice, abandonment, isolation, torture, and death, right? That's not what the Bible's about. And Kohelet has us wrestle with that. You can't control God. You can't manipulate Him. At the end of the day, death comes for us all. And then you jump to the end. We'll come back to the middle. And he says, not only can you not control God, but you can't control life and creation. Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift, nor to the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge. But time and chance happen to them all, for man doesn't know his time. And just like fish that are taken up in an evil net, and like birds that are caught in a snare, so the children of man are snared at an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them. We think the race should go to the quick. I went to a couple track meets over here at Strathaven this past year because Kate was doing some track, mostly some of the jumping events. And I went and watched it, and Coco was racing too, and she's fast. And I've seen her run, and I've seen her fast, and I've seen them line up there and they get ready for the race. I'm like, I'll bet you Coco's going to leave all these people in the dust. And sure enough, she starts off, she's doing great, but she's also doing hurdle-ins. And don't you know, just like that, ankle catches one of the hurdles, down she goes, and she's limping off, right? The race doesn't always go to the fastest, or bread doesn't always go to the wisest, or the most intelligent, or filled with the most riches. It's just not how that happens, because when you least expect it, like a fish swimming just on, minding his own business, is caught up in a net, so too the days of calamity come when we least expect it. I mean, he's talked about this already. We saw it in chapter 3. For everything, there's a season. There's a season for joy. There's a season for struggle. There's a season for laughing. There's a season for sobbing, right? There's a season for life. There's a season of death. And you got no control over it. I'm not seeing too many smiles. You okay? That's the medicine, right? It hurts going down. You see what he's poking at, right? Because he asks this constant, like, what do you gain from all your striving? All that striving to control. Watch out for that striving of control, because it's elusive. You think you can get control, but you can't. You can't get control of God, but your acts of service or whatever, and you can't get control of the times. You can't get control of creation. And if you live your life lusting after that control, trying to get control of the past and the things that have been done to you, trying to get control of the future and to wield the future in a way that it will work for my profit and gain. Here's his point. You'll miss what God might have for you to enjoy today. And that's where he goes right here in the middle part. Verse 7 starts off with a command. Go. It's an imperative. Go. It's almost like he's saying there, hey, Stop with the constant complaining. Stop wasting your life complaining over all that's not right. We all know that. Stop wasting your life with the complaining. Stop nursing grudges and anger. Stop striving for vindication over the wrongs that have been done to you and the injustices you've perceived in the past, right? Stop fretting about, your troubles and your problems or the things that are coming tomorrow, because these are paralyzing things. They will hold you dead in your tracks. And he says, go, eat your bread with joy. I wonder even, how do you hear that phrase? Go eat your bread with joy. Right? Oh, yeah, I can have bread and enjoy it. Or do you try to paraphrase that? Well, surely he means go eat your crab cakes and your ribeye, your surf and turf, and do that with joy, right? Like sometimes that happens. Like I wonder if in our life we get so accustomed to good things that we just can't enjoy the simple pleasures. Go eat your bread, all right? Or like I mentioned it last week, he's cautioning us against this business of constant envy and dissatisfaction, right? And I gave you the illustration of my kids who fed them a great breakfast, fed them a great lunch. They seemed satisfied. They were happy and glad. Dad, you're the best dad in the world, mate. They didn't say that, but I could read it on their eyes. And then they come over to church, and there's Ed Evans sitting with his bag of Chick-fil-A, and all that contentment and all that joy and boom, out the window. How come we don't get Chick-fil-A? Life's not fair. Can you receive your bread with joy? Satisfaction. Are you too busy noticing what your neighbors have around you and that doesn't work. I need the next best thing or whatever. Eat your bread with joy. Drink your wine with a merry heart. And then he adds this extra line, which is so significant. He doesn't use the pagan phrase, which Paul quotes, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. He could have said that. But notice what he says. Eat your bread with joy. Drink your wine with a merry heart. For God has already, or actually more literally, has long ago approved what you do. What does that mean? Eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has long ago approved what you do. What does that mean? It's him going all the way back to the beginning and saying, look, this is what God did. He created this world, and he gave us a world where we could have bread to enjoy and wine to drink with a merry heart. And he approves that you would take of his good creation and receive it with joy and receive it with a merry heart. Again, we read from Psalm 104 this morning. That's probably my favorite psalm on any given day, maybe. And it's just because part of the reason I love it is because he points to creation. And he says, look at this in creation. And the goal is to get you enamored with the grandeur and the goodness and the greatness of God. And in the middle of it, he says stuff like, you cause the grass to grow for the livestock, and plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth fruit from the earth, and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen man's heart. Right, that's his point. You go back to Genesis 1. After everything God creates, what does he say? It's good. Right? And he approves when we take that good creation and we use it and we delight in it. I would love to rant on some of those theologies that want to tell us that certain aspects of God's creation, maybe certain ones that have a certain alcohol content, are not good or bad or sinful or evil or something like that. I'll tell the story. So this past week, I had some pastors come over for dinner from the area, from our pastors group, cooked up some barbecue and tacos and things like that, and put out some drinks. And I had in the fridge some stuff that had a very mild alcoholic content to it. I thought, well, I don't know, do I put that out or not? If I put that out, the Baptists, they might be a little judgy about that. But if I don't put it out, I don't know if the Presbyterians are going to stay. They're going to leave. And I say that because we have some Presbyterians visiting here this morning. So I throw that in there just for them. I went to a Presbyterian seminary. I don't think they ever heard of soda. Like, I would go out for lunch with my professors or other students, and I swear, they would not darken the door of an institution that did not have something with an alcohol. Anyway, that's a side conversation. But at the end of the day, let us never be guilty of bad theology that would say that anything in God's creation is bad or evil or wicked. Sure, take Kohelet's theology that man's heart is wicked all the time and does perverse things with God's creation, right? We abuse it, we enslave ourselves to it, we use it as an escape, or we just walk around in drunken stupors to avoid the difficulties of life. Yeah, sure, but don't miss what he's saying. God has filled, the psalmist says it, Jesus confirms it. Eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a merry heart, walk around with white garments and oil on your head. Don't over-spiritualize that. Don't make it a gospel paraphrase. That's simply saying in a hot, dry, desert, arid land, you probably don't want to walk around in dark clothing because that'll just make life all the more miserable. Walk around in light clothing where the sun, kind of reflects off of that. And if, your skin is drying out, or some of you who have a little bit more of exposed head is drying out in that hot sun, put some oil on the thing so that you're not just miserable all the time. It's an invitation maybe to take some of the good of God's creation and let it be a balm for you or a comfort or a soothing element against, life that is hard so that you can enjoy it. Enjoy your wife whom God has given to you. Enjoy your labor and your toil. What's he doing? I think, he's going all the way back to creation. And he says, this is what God gives to us. He gives us bread to eat, wine to drink. He gives you oil to anoint yourself with. He gives you, right, when he saw that it wasn't good for Adam to be alone, he gave him a woman and said, here's a wife. Go with the life and the work and what I call you to, with a companion and a helper. Or even you go back, we're so used to thinking about work as a drudgery, but man, in its original context, work in God's creation was part of our glory. It was part of our glory that God would say, hey, look at the toil I've done. I've just filled the earth with these good things, with plants and animals. I've filled the skies and the heavens. And man, here's your God likeness that you get to pick up where I left off and be at work in my creation. It becomes wearisome once those thorns come in, as a result of the curse and whatnot. But that doesn't remove part of that glory and that joy that can be there from the toil. So real quick, let me just also say, are you able to see yet? I don't know if you've read through the whole book since we've been going, but are you able to see how this is such a big concern for Kohelet? Right, we see this over and over. We saw it in chapter 3. After he's gone through, hey, we have no control over these seasons. And then he says in verse 12, I perceive that there's nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in his toil. This is God's gift to man. Or chapter 5, verse 16, behold, I have seen to be good. But what I have seen to be good and fitting is what? It's to eat and drink and find enjoyment and all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given to him. This is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and to rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. Or again in chapter 8, where we sort of left off when we were recapping there, in verse 15, again, I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. Kohelet is not one to say that all of life is meaningless and all of life is vain. Yeah, it may be all smoke, it's fleeting, and you can't get control over it, but that's very, very different than saying there aren't anything good in life. No. He sees that there is rich stuff from the hand of a good and generous Creator. Something has gone off and gone wrong, such that there is death in this picture now, such that there's an unpredictability, and I can't figure it out. I don't know why it happens to the good and the bad, to the righteous and the unrighteous. But here's the thing, you'll drive yourself mad and you'll miss it if you seek to get control again. You let that go so that you can go and eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a merry heart, walk around in your white clothes, oil on your head, enjoy your wife, enjoy the work that God has for you today. Right? Do you see it? Do you see why you have to swallow that tough pill? You have to sit with Kohelet and let him shatter that illusion of control so that you would be free to live life to the full that God would have for you here and now. Well, I would love to, I wish we could do a whole other sermon on this, because I'd love to expand this theme. I'd love to show you how, like when you get into the prophets and they're looking forward to the wonderful day of new creation. What's interesting is guys like Isaiah in Isaiah 65, they're not saying, oh, when new creation comes, it's going to be the American dream, and you finally get all those things you've been dreaming for in life. That's not how he talks about it. He talks about it much more simple than that. He just says, everybody will get to plant their own trees and eat of their fruit in peace, and there won't be predators that are going to come and steal it and rob it from you. Right? You'll be able to bear children, not for calamity and futility, but for peace. Right? It's very simple. And for them, this is the rich stuff in life. Or I'd love to show you, you come into the New Testament and, man, in the book of Acts, where on the back end of this world-shattering event of the resurrection of Christ and Peter coming and proclaiming it and people getting in on this, what's the first thing they do? Or how does Acts 2 end? What are they doing? They're in one another's homes and they're eating their bread with glad and generous hearts. And they're devoting themselves to the wisdom and the teaching of the apostles. And they're sharing their resources with one another so that other people can enjoy their bread and their life as best they can. And they're being at work. They're toiling faithfully for the sake of the kingdom. On and on we could go. But the way I want to close it back up is just by poking at a little bit more, and then we'll end it with this. Just that warning to be careful about that illusion of control. Not only is it an illusion, but it never promises what we think it will. Control, that is. It's interesting. I'd be very curious to see how Kohelet would write to a church in the 21st century, in an affluent suburban, right, or whatever. Because we have come exponentially farther than Kohelet in his day in terms of our ability to have control over the elements in the business of life, right? Man, we have technology that is increasing exponentially, as I'm preaching this sermon probably, right? Technology that allows us to have greater control over time and you wield time for our benefit and our sufficiency, right? Or technology that allows us to go through life without some of the pain and some of the hurt or the medical conditions maybe that we had. Or technology that allows us to go through life with a little bit more comfort and peace and, just enjoyment. Somebody's going to have to wake up. No, he's awake. Somebody's going to have to nudge Rich Hoback. He was telling me yesterday, essentially in no uncertain terms, that, man, we have these nice, newer, comfortable chairs, nice, cool breeze of the air conditioning, and with that and my soothing voice has apparently given him some of the best naps he's ever had in life, right? So we have all this technology that can increase our comfort. Okay, but just play that out. And if we could have time to really unpack this, right? Yeah, we have technology now so that we can control time and wield it more in our favor. And what do we do with all that extra time that we have? We fill it up. Man, how many of those studies were coming out, during COVID and during the time of the pandemic when, we were all supposedly freed up to, work from home and you got all those extra hours? What did people do? They filled it with more labor and more work and more toil, right? Or we fill it with more activities and doing this, that, and the other. And so at the end of the day, we're tired, we're stressed, and if anybody ever asks us how we're doing, all we can think to say is we're busy. Or, we've got all this technology now that fills life with more comfort, with more entertainment and joy and whatever. And yet, I wonder if in doing that, it has robbed us of the ability to just enjoy the simple pleasures and joys and goodness of God's creation that comes to us every single day. And right, if the mounting numbers of ongoing depression and despair would indicate anything, that greater control over our pleasure and enjoyment and entertainment hasn't really done anything to curb that just haunting malaise that haunts us all. Or we have just greater control through technology over anything you want. And yet, if the statistics are anything, with each new generation that's coming on, they're more anxious over what might come than the generation before them. And if you read the writers, they would say, and they're more anxious. You know why the younger kids are more anxious? It's because their parents are more anxious, right? It's almost as if you take that beast of an idol of control and you keep feeding it, and you keep feeding it. You maybe get more control, but yet you dread all the more the slightest bit of aspect of life that you don't have control over it. And so, you read people all the time who are saying more and more, we just don't know how to handle any more life that is chaotic and out of our control. We can't rest in it. We can't find peace in it. All we can find is mounting anxiety. And so now we have to take that technology and we have to take whatever goodness of God's creation and help us somehow just to escape from the madness of it all. I feel like I'm ending on a depressing note. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to say, let Kohelet's words sink deep. Let it be that painful medicine that burns, but let it do its work. Let it expose the fraudulency of this myth of control. Let it poke at your heart. Man, it was doing this to me yesterday. I had a to-do list, things that I wanted to do around the house. And it was also on my to-do. I was also on kid duty. And so if I was going to get my chore list done, I had to have those kids under control. I had them be playing in a spot where that I knew where they were and whatever. And if you know anything about 5- and 6-year-old, they're another thing that constantly defies the ability to control it. And so I'm trying to do my thing, but I have to come back and I have to tend to them because they're uncontrolled and the one's hitting the other and all this sort of stuff. And I'm feeling that frustration. I'm feeling that tension. I'm certainly not enjoying the day. And when I go to eat lunch, I'm certainly not eating, isn't it great to have this bread? No, I'm stress eating. Or I'm tempted to grab that bottle of wine that's up there and use it as an escape, not enjoy it with a merry heart or anything like that. Why? Because that beast of control, it gets me quite often. So do you see that in your own life? Do you see this desire to get control over the injustice that happened to you in the past? To get control over this uncertain future, to wield it for your own favor? Who cares that Jesus says, why are you so worried about your life and what you're going to eat and what you're going to wear? Don't you see how God cares for the lilies of the field and the birds of the air? Don't you know he's going to care for you? Yeah, no, but I need control. Or when Jesus says to the barn builder, you fool, you build your barn instead of participating in the local economy and giving to others. Don't you know tonight your life will be required of you? Yeah, but I want control. Let Kohelet poke at that. Let him dismantle it. Let him do that where you don't have the control you think you have or the control you think you're going to get. And as you swallow that and move into it, maybe, Lord willing, by his grace, he helps us to receive with thanksgiving the simple joys, the simple pleasures that he has for us. Man, on and on I can go. If you're a younger person or a younger family here, man, I would encourage you to talk to some of the older people in the congregation where that illusion of control has sort of been shattered. And diagnoses and things pop out of the blue. Where in the world did that come from? And they're starting to learn, this control thing, And I was meeting with Fran Reichel this week. I've mentioned her before. That poor woman. Just when she thinks maybe she gets control over some condition, another weird condition pops up. And the poor woman has been dealing with chronic migraines for the better part of a year, 2 years, on top of, you know her story. But as we were meeting this week, she was talking to me, this morning I woke up, I wasn't dizzy. And I could walk to the table. And I could eat the food. And I was smiling. I was like, all right, this is good. It's a good day. And I don't know when the last time I walked to the breakfast table. Hey, look at this. I walked to the table. I got food. This is a good day. I'm learning from Fran. You let go of that myth of control, and you start to receive just the simple things with great joy. And that's what I would encourage you to do. And maybe I'll end it reminding you of what Kohelet does, that the righteous and the wise, their lives and their deeds are in the hands of the living God. God is unpredictable. You can't get control of him. You can't manipulate him. And if anything, the rest of the story tells us, that's a really good thing, because he'll shock you. There's this really curious thing that happens in the climax of the whole story, that to the righteous happens what should have happened to the wicked. And to the wicked, they get what belongs to the righteous. Isn't that the center point of the whole biblical story? That God himself, in the person of Jesus Christ, who was perfectly righteous and perfectly faithful and perfectly unfailing in every way, shape, or form, to him happened what was rightly due to the wicked and to the sinners and the defiled and to those who won't sacrifice and won't bend the knee, so that the sinners and the unjust, so that you and I could receive what rightly belongs to him. Right? And when you grasp that, and you live on the back end of that wild unpredictability of this God, and you say, yeah, my life is in his hands, you find comfort, you find encouragement, you find hope that Kohelet talks about but doesn't even know the half of it. And maybe you find, well, Lord willing, you find the freedom until that great day comes when I'm a full inheritor of all that belongs to Christ. Until that day comes, I can just receive with joy, with a merry heart, with thanksgiving, whatever God has for me today. Amen? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.